Murdered your dad.
No, I did
Yes, you
not.
did.
No.
Yeah,
Yes.
Daddy's dead because of you.
Hours of interrogation. Police lying to a suspect in the Inland Empire until he falsely confesses to murder. And now the city of Fontana is paying a massive settlement tonight after police questioned a man for 17 hours until he confessed to killing his father, who's still alive.
This is an insane and outrageous story, and probably the worst case of a false confession that I've ever heard. The man at the center of it was just awarded right around $900,000 in a settlement, and in my opinion, he deserves way more than that. Just wait until you hear the details, because this is absolutely horrifying. So although this case did just settle, this is all coming from an incident that happened back in 2018. Thomas Perez Jr. called the police to report that his dad, Thomas Perez Sr., was missing. Apparently, they had gotten into some sort of an argument. His dad then went out to walk the dog, and 5 minutes later, apparently the dog came back without the dad. After about 24 hours, Perez Jr. reported him missing. But when he did, the police thought something was off about his demeanor. So they brought him in for questioning and also searched his home. When they did, investigators said that they found the dad's wallet, cell phone, and some purported bloodstains on a portion of the carpet. And what's more, the canine with them had alerted the police to some possible human remains, apparently. And so the police took this information and decided to interrogate Perez Jr. for 17 hours about his dad's murder. In the process, they accused him of murdering his dad, claiming that they had found his dad dead.
We just told you we found your dead dad, and you don't give a
But the problem is, this was a lie. In fact, they didn't know where Perez Sr. was, and certainly never found him dead. And that's because after all of this was said and done, Thomas Perez Sr. was reported to not only be not murdered, but not even be dead. What had happened to him? Apparently, he went to go and visit a friend and left his things behind. But this whole interrogation story just gets worse the more you dig into it. The police also apparently brought in Perez Jr.'s dog, Margot, and suggested that they would have to euthanize her because she was depressed after having witnessed the murder.
No, I did
Yes, you
not.
did.
No.
Yeah,
Yes.
Daddy's dead because of you.
No.
Yes, not only that, but poor Morgan here.
Margot.
Margot.
Margot had to witness it.
Yep. I walked through the blood.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, they apparently took Perez Jr. in a police car at one point and drove him around, purportedly to look for his father. On the way, he apparently begged for medical attention because they had denied him his medications for a psychiatric condition that he has. And in response, they basically told him, nope, sorry, a hospital isn't going to help you right now. Now, according to the judge that was overseeing the litigation that resulted from this incident, by the end of this interrogation, Perez Jr. was sleep deprived, mentally ill, and significantly undergoing symptoms of withdrawal from his psychiatric medications. All of this brought him to the absolute brink, and he suffered a complete and total mental breakdown.
Detectives keep pushing. Perez spirals further. Eventually, Perez Jr. makes a false confession to killing his father.
According to reports, eventually the police lied to Perez Jr. when they told him that his father's body had been located and that he was in the morgue with multiple stab wounds. As a result, Perez Jr. falsely confessed, and the detectives left him alone in the interrogation room. Video footage of him in the interrogation room by himself then showed him trying to take his own life. And you know what makes everything worse? At some point along the way, the police found out that Perez Sr. was alive and well. They found this out apparently when Perez Sr.'s daughter called the police to tell them that Perez Sr. was at the airport on his way to visit a friend in Northern California. But did the police tell Perez Jr. that, even though he was in custody at the time? They apparently withheld that information and then sent him off to a hospital to be placed under a psychiatric hold for 3 days and ordered the hospital staff to withhold all communications from Perez Jr. from the outside world. And then they took the dog to the pound. Thank goodness Perez Jr. was eventually able to track down his pup with the dog's microchip, but regardless, everything about this is enraging. Now, for starters, obviously this was a false confession to murder because it is impossible for Perez Jr. to have murdered his father. You kind of need a dead victim for that after all. And you might think, who would confess to committing a murder that they didn't actually commit? Well, unfortunately, false confessions apparently happen way more often than you would think. Apparently, in criminal cases where the defendant was wrongfully convicted, 25% of them had a false confession present. And according to the Innocence Project, it most often happens because of increased stress, mental exhaustion, promises of lenient sentences, or an individual's challenges with understanding their constitutional rights. Children, people with intellectual disabilities, and people with language barriers are particularly vulnerable to this kind of thing. And on average, people who were falsely confessed were typically interrogated for up to 16 hours before admitting to a crime they didn't commit. And so when it comes to police interviews and police interrogations, the police actually have a duty to ensure that any confession that is made by a person is not coerced. Otherwise, you have an Eighth Amendment issue on your hands where the defendant is going to be alleging cruel and unusual punishment. And the law is actually pretty damn clear on why Perez Jr. has an obviously winning case here. When it comes to coerced police confessions, the U.S. Supreme Court has a long list of cases outlining what is and is not okay. And at the end of the day, a confession by a person can only be used in court if it is given voluntarily. And to determine whether or not a confession is voluntary, courts ask, is the confession the product of an essentially free and unconstrained choice by its maker? If it is, if he has willed to confess, it may be used against him. If it is not, if his will has been overborne and his capacity for self-determination critically impaired, the use of his confession offends due process. And so to figure this out, courts look at the totality of the circumstances, looking at both the details of the accused and the details of the interrogation itself. Factors that courts will take into account are things like the youth of the accused, his or her lack of education, if he or she has low intelligence, lack of advice as to the accused's constitutional rights, the length of the detention, the repeated and prolonged nature of the questioning, and the use of physical punishment such as the deprivation of food or sleep or medications. And so looking at this case, we have a very clear violation of Thomas Perez Jr.'s rights. And from this vantage point, it's pretty obvious that this confession is coerced. We have, first of all, the fact that there wasn't a murder that actually even happened. But beyond that, we have the fact that this is an interrogation that went on for 17 hours. We also have the fact that he was sleep deprived. We also have the fact that he begged for medical assistance because he was denied medications he needed for a psychiatric disorder that he has. And in fact, we have the fact that the denial of his medications was so bad that he was exhibiting symptoms of withdrawal. So even if he actually committed the murder, there's no way that this confession could have been used in court because it is 100% coerced. But this goes beyond just a mere coerced confession, and it gets into the territory of cruel and unusual punishment because of the severity of the actions by the police. There's not just all of the things that I mentioned up above, but also the fact that they sent him off to a 3-day isolated psychiatric hold while thinking that he had murdered his father and that his dog was also about to be put down as a result. This is just absolutely horrific and a nightmare that seemingly could be played out against any citizen if confronted by the wrong police officers using the wrong tactics. And that's why, in my personal opinion, this poor guy really should have received millions of dollars for having to go through this whole ordeal. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Are you as outraged by this whole thing as I am? Or do you think I may be overreacting here? If you do think that this lawsuit is a just one, how much do you think is appropriate for this man to receive from the police department in some kind of a settlement? Let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this or at least found it interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're new here and you want to see more content like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded. See you in the next one.